Hello everyone, I'm Taaka Awori, founder and CEO of Busara Africa, a Pan-African leadership development firm. Welcome to the Leadership in Africa Redefined podcast. This podcast seeks to do two things. One, change the narrative of leadership in Africa, and two, provide concrete strategies and tips for leading in an African context. We do this by interviewing amazing African leaders so that the narrative of leadership in Africa is defined by the best of us, not the worst of us. We share their stories and provide practical suggestions for dealing with the challenges of leading on this continent. We discuss, interrogate, and examine concrete leadership practices that work. We also look at failures that these leaders faced and how they navigated their ways back on track. It's an exciting and empowering space for leaders to thrive and engage. Subscribe to the show to become the leader you have always wanted to be. And if you like the show, be sure you rate it and review it. It helps others to find it. Thanks so much. Hello, our wonderful guests, and welcome to another episode of Leadership in Africa Redefined, the podcast season 2. And guess what? I am so excited about season 2 because for my first guest in season 2, I have a very, very special sister. Now, this guest, I'm not sure actually how I'm going to be able to introduce her because someone of so many accomplishments, if you see the long list of accomplishments I have for her, it's going to be difficult for me to do this, but let me try. So, our distinguished guest for this first episode of season 2 is Her Excellency Erelu Bisi Adeleye-Fayemi, and we'll explain what Erelu means in a little bit, but we have to recognize that. She's a Nigerian British feminist activist, policy advocate, social change, philanthropy practitioner, and writer. She was the first lady of Ekiti State, Nigeria, as wife of Ekiti State Governor Dr. Kayode-Fayemi from 2010 to 2014, and from 2018 to 2022. And as the First Lady, Bisi used her platform to influence legal and policy reforms, mobilize resources from a wide range of stakeholders for the promotion and protection of the rights of women and girls. So she made a difference in the lives of women and girls. Bisi is a co-founder of the African Women's Development Fund, the first Africa-wide grant-making foundation for women, and she and I currently sit on that board together. She's the founder of Above Whispers Media Foundation and writes a weekly column called Loud Whispers. And she's also set up a mentoring program called the Rapper Network. Bisi has served as the UN Women Nigeria Advisor and as the director of Akinamama Wa Africa. So Bisi is a prolific author. I mean, absolutely amazing. And it was such a gift. I'm so glad she's actually sharing her gift with us. Some of the books she has written, Speaking for Myself, Perspectives on Social, Political, and Feminist Activism in Africa. Speaking Above a Whisper, that was 2013, an autobiography. Loud Whispers in 2017. Where is Your Rapper? And these latter ones, I can start to show. Where is Your Rapper? This one was written in 2020. That's why I'm showing you how prolific she is. In this one, Demand and Supply, you wrote in 2023. And more recently, I know you did co-edit a book with Jessica Horner, Voice, Power, and Soul. But more recently, she has written a tray of Locust Beans, and she's received numerous awards, but you can already see what an accomplished person Bisi is. I think I will just be simply to say that I am introducing my feminist sister, Erelu Bisi Adeleye-Fayemi. Bisi, you are welcome.
Thank you so much, Taaka, for that very gracious introduction. And thank you for having me on your program.
Oh, I'm honored. Tell us what Erelu is as a title. I think our guests need to hear that.
Thank you, Taaka. Erelu in Yoruba communities means Queen Mother or leader of women. And it's one of majorly three titles that women had in our traditional communities. If you go across Yoruba land, there is no community where you will not find women who have the title of Iyalode, the leader of women, Iyaloja, the leader of the market women, or Erelu, queen mother or leader of women. And sometimes they are called Yeyoba, which also means the mother of the king. And what these titles have in common is that these women served as a voice of women in their communities. These were the acknowledged and respected leaders of women. And the kings could not make any decision about anything in the community without the input of any of these female title holders. And so when I was made the Erelu of my hometown, which is also my husband's hometown in Ishon, Ekiti, I decided I was going to use that title as a reminder that talking about women in leadership is nothing new to us as African women. It is something we've always had. And these are things that have been taken away from us, the same way in which our voices and our agency have been stripped over time. But we have always been leaders. We have always had a seat at the table, or at least had some kind of a voice. And this is something that we have to hold on to.
I love it. What a perfect way to start, BC, because the whole idea behind this podcast and the book, Redefining Leadership, is just what you said. We forgot that traditionally African leadership recognized women as leaders. And just talking about Yoruba culture and Erelu and the role of Erelu is a wonderful reminder for that. So thank you for that. And thank you for living into the title. So it's not just a title, but it's really a reflection. And our listeners, as you start to hear about BC's work, will start to see how she's really lived that. It hasn't just been about a title. It's actually been about her work. So BC, I'm going to start out, interestingly enough, actually with your latest book. And oh my goodness, truly, 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 you do have such a gift. So folks, please get hold of BC's books. This latest one is a collection of poetry and essays. But BC, as I was writing this, I felt like the characters and scenarios were just jumping out of the page and was so relatable. But they were relatable also with some very heavy, difficult issues. So we're talking about ethnic violence, defilement, rape, corruption. And I truly appreciated how these are so much a reflection of the realities that women in Nigeria and over Africa are facing. So maybe my question for you is, I know somewhere in the book, I think it is in the intro where you say, you're such an optimist. So maybe my first question for you is, as we hear everything happening in Nigeria now, particularly in terms of the economic turmoil, the hardships, BC, what keeps you hopeful about Nigeria at this time? And tied to that, are you seeing any leadership in Nigeria right now that's giving you a sense of optimism?
Thank you, Taaka. Let me first of all put it in context. My essays over the past couple of years have been reproduced in 3 volumes. Loud Whispers is volume 1. Where is Your Rapper is volume 2. And Demand and Supply is in volume 3. And when I write my weekly Loud Whispers column, I write them as essays or as short stories or poetry. And 3 years ago, some young people who I was having an interactive session with suggested that I should pull my short stories and poetry into an anthology, that it would help inspire young writers. And I thought it was a great idea. So I did that last year. So Demand and Supply is volume 3 of Loud Whispers. And The Tree of Locust Beans is an anthology of all my short stories and poetry that I have written over the years. And it came out at the same time as Demand and Supply. But to the question you asked me, Taaka, what am I hopeful about? in light of all the challenges that we continue to face as a country. And I know that the challenges that we face in Nigeria are no different from challenges in other African countries.
Yes.
We are dealing with high rates of inflation, economic hardship, unemployment. Hunger is widespread in the land. The gap between the rich and the poor continues to grow. We have a lot of issues with insecurity, which is fueled by insurgencies and kidnapping, armed robbers. And we have hundreds and thousands of people living in internally displaced camps, and a majority of them are women and girls. And we have such high levels of sexual violence across our communities. And our law enforcement agencies continue to be overwhelmed and they struggle to deal with these issues. But in spite of all this, and there are so many more, but in spite of all this, the things that give me hope are, first of all, the women who in their different spaces, particularly through the civil society organizations and self-help groups, are the ones who are at the front line of providing support services from women and children who are the receiving end of all these difficult situations, particularly when we are talking about conflict, sexual violence, and poverty. I'm also very happy about how young people across our communities are stepping up to use technology, agribusiness, and other forms of entrepreneurship to create jobs to be able to fend for themselves and for their families. And that will also contributing to national development. And this has always happened, but as we continue to see more of these problems, and especially during the COVID period and post-COVID, a lot of our citizens who can be described as middle class have continued to use their resources and networks to address issues around poverty and hunger in their communities. And their local philanthropic efforts, for example, help pay for scholarships, school uniforms, food banks, and grants to individuals to help them get back on their feet. And another thing that gives me a great deal of joy, and I'm sure it's something many people can relate to, is our creative industry and how young people, not just young people, people across generations are using film, music, television, and fashion to not only create jobs that help our economies, but also tell stories that help reframe the narratives we have about Africa and as a continent. So as I said in Demand and Supply, I'm an eternal optimist, and I hope that in these areas where we see the leadership of regular people, we'll continue to see traction in areas that can enable us, do better in our communities.
So interesting. As you were starting to list the people that are giving you hope and the kinds of activities you're seeing, your last sentence you just said summarized what was running through my mind. And what you said is it's the leadership of regular people. And what's starting to dawn on me just from your answer, maybe not dawn on me, but I guess something that's becoming affirmed in me is that too often on this continent, we're looking to the state to lead the transformation of our nations. And in many respects, it does have full responsibility. We pay taxes, we do all of that. But what I'm hearing from you in terms of optimism is that the seeds, the waves of transformation, the leadership, to bring transformation in Nigeria and in other places will not always come from there. It will come from the women, the young people, the middle class who use their philanthropic efforts, and the creative ones in different industries like Nollywood who are able to transform things. So we don't always have to look to the states. We too, as ordinary people, can not just always focus on government, but can say, where is our leadership as well in transforming our...
Absolutely. The leadership from the people is absolutely critical because there's only so much political leaders can do. And unfortunately, there is a commodity that our political leaders are supposed to have, to help entrench their leadership legitimacy, which sadly they are lacking in, and that is trust. So if people have grown to mistrust, their leaders, they can only put trust in themselves and their own abilities and capacities to change their destinies. But I would like to see a relationship that is, not exclusive of, all these different entities and components. We need our political leadership, and we need the citizens for us to be able to have a different narrative for our countries.
Yes. And maybe that does bring me to my second question around political leadership. And as you said, one of the commodities that's missing is trust. But it is in demand and supply where you said, when you were talking about your insights on the political terrain, particularly as from your experience as First Lady of Ekiti State and as a political mobilizer. And I love this one statement you said. It is possible to keep political promises and commitments. Now, the reality is, just from what you said, I think the lack of trust comes because so few politicians, political leaders have been able to keep their promises. So I guess my question for you is, I guess it's twofold. Can we still be hopeful about leadership in the political space? And what did you and the governor, Dr. Adeleye-Fayemi, do differently to enable you to keep your political promises where so many others have failed?
Thank you. I think my husband did well as a political leader, or at least better than others, because of where he was coming from. My husband and I have a background in social justice movements, in the Pan-African movement, in conversations that have been taking place for over 30 years about how we can do better, as African people, and the role that we have to play as leaders and as citizens to create a new story. And so when he found himself in a position of leadership, and I found myself at his side with this platform to be able to walk the talk and make good on all the things that we have been demanding of other leaders over time from when we were young activists, I think that what really helped was being clear that we were in a position of trust, and we could not afford to abuse that trust, and that we had to be able to be accountable, not only to the people who had voted my husband into office, but also the constituencies that we had grown up in. The human rights community, the social change communities, for me, the feminist community, the social change philanthropy community. I knew that questions would be asked at some point. When you were in these positions or on these platforms, what did you do differently? And that's the question you're asking me now. So I was able to observe that my husband was able to do things differently because he was a leader who had a vision. He was passionate about the change he could make. And his leadership philosophy is one that is embedded in service to the people as opposed to being served. And all these things, leadership vision, passion, commitment, service to people, are all part of the infrastructure around political will that we always talk about. Because with political will, you can get things done even with the meager resources that might be available, to you. Ekiti State is one of the smallest states in Nigeria. Small in terms of size, although we are larger than many countries across the continent, considering the size of Africa. Ekiti State has a population of roughly 3 million people. So we are small in terms of our size, but also small in terms of the budget we get from federal allocations. There are other states in Nigeria that get 4 times the amount of money that we get in Ekiti State. But in spite of that, my husband was able to achieve a number of things with the resources at our disposal and using his goodwill, his reputation, and his knowledge of different networks and spaces to be able to attract investments and resources to the state. So with that, he was able to plan better for the state. So instead of haphazard things that governments are used to doing, you come in for 4 years or at most 8 years, you do what you can and you leave. Another government comes in and they change course immediately because they have their own vision. My husband started out by working on a 30-year development plan for the state. And he built a competent team, a team of people with good character, with competence, and who were committed to helping achieve that vision. And communications was key to how he ensured that he let people know what he was doing, how he was doing it, and what was going wrong if there were times where the commitments couldn't be met. And especially during his second term, having a good communication strategy became extremely important. And with that, he was able to do a whole range of things, build new roads or rehabilitate old ones, build schools and invest in education, support the elderly. And he had a really good gender mainstreaming strategy. And I must confess, I was key to that. And so at the end of the day, after the 8-year period that he was in office, he was able to demonstrate the results of what it means to have a leader who is intentional, who is prepared, and who has a vision that is about the progress and development of the community. And also bringing in other leaders to be able to take that vision forward. Because you can't be a successful leader if you are not preparing a pipeline of other leaders to be able to take these issues forward.
Hi, folks. Hope you're enjoying the show. So have you heard about the Africa Leaders Circle? Our impactful e-learning platform that enables you to grow into the leader you would want to follow? Here is a message to tell you what you need to know.
Are you a CEO, executive director, or HR manager that is looking to build a pipeline of leaders that are ready to step up into management roles? Are you looking for a self-paced learning platform that provides your leaders with quality content and does not take them away from their work for too long? Are you looking for a program that enables your managers to move from knowledge acquisition to demonstrable improved practice? Then look no further. Sign them up for the African Leaders Circle today. The African Leaders Circle is an e-learning platform that gives your managers access to an exclusive community of leaders across the continent and a wide range of strategies and tools to stand out. We do this through online courses, discussion forums, a library of resources, and a personal learning advisor to support each of your managers to maximize their learning on the platform. To learn more, visit our website www.busara-africa.com.
Don't forget to visit our website busara-africa.com to learn more. And now back to the show. And I love what you're bringing up because some of the characteristics and attributes you described that Dr. Kayode brought to this leadership role are many of those that we talk about in other spaces. So that his leadership philosophy, his vision, his ability to communicate, what he can do, what he can't do, his intentionality, building up a strong team, the pipeline, all of that. What I have found, or what I've often heard, is that those particular attributes, when you bring them into the political space, it becomes so difficult that even those with the best of wishes or the best of intentions find it hard because it's such a tough space in that respect. And I love you have a particular essay in Demand and Supply where you're talking about the vocabulary, where you're like, for instance, the Godfather, it's real. The Godmother, she's there, it's real. But I think you give us a flavor about your level of insights on what this political terrain is like. So my question to you is, what is one thing we would have to change about the way we do our politics so that it's easier for more people to display the type of leadership that Dr. Fayemi was able to display? Because many try, they come in with best of intentions, but are not able to do what he did. So what's one thing we would need to change in the system to make it easier for people to do that?
There are many things that we would need to change.
Yeah.
But if I was to talk about one thing, I would say it is the mindset that politics is meant for only a certain kind of people.
I love
And people who pride themselves on having a certain reputation or certain values should not venture into political leadership because it is dirty, the waters are murky, and then you end up being stained through your association with these political, entities. And it is that kind of mindset that has kept people with the right kind of values, with the right competencies, and the right attitudes away from leadership.
Exactly.
I have always argued that any leadership space has to be broad enough to be able to accommodate people of all kinds of persuasion. But at the end of the day, the same way in which oil gets separated from water, then people will be able to determine who they want as their leaders. And if we can all agree that there are certain values and competencies that we require from our leaders, then we should not be discouraging those who are able to do those things, but we are telling them, no, please don't go there because it is meant for people who don't mind about their reputations or who can, who are only prepared to do business as usual. Yes, there are gray areas in politics, and yes, sometimes you find yourself in difficult situations and circumstances, but we all need to work on that mindset and shift the conversation to one in which all of us are entitled to that space. We should ensuring that we have a leadership process that brings in people who are able to offer their talents, their skills, and their passion to changing things in our communities. Otherwise, we will end up with the same old, tired, recycled, and incompetent leadership that we have become accustomed to.
Yeah, I love that. Indeed, it is the mindset, because I've seen too many amazing leaders, particularly women, who I'm like, you would be perfect, but would never ever stand for a political position. So changing that mindset means that we're offering a lot higher caliber of people for all of us to select from when we vote. Yeah. Okay. So, Bisi, I want to switch tack a bit and move to your leadership. I've talked about your leadership together with Dr. Fayemi in political terrain. And now I want to come to all your amazing leadership in the feminist space, where we meet each other as sisters. And talk about the title to, this is the second, you said, in the volume. This is the second. Yeah, this is the second.
Yes.
And dear listeners, the title is Where is Your Rapper? But I love it because it's both the title of the book, but it's also a question you pose in one of the riveting essays in the book. So please tell us more. Tell our audience more about what this question means and how it can be applied in the context of women's leadership.
Sometime in November 2019, I was invited to address a women's conference in Lagos.
Okay.
It was organized by a chapter of the Redeemed Christian Church of God. And it's an annual conference that usually has in attendance roughly 2,000 to 3,000 women. I am not a member of the Redeemed Christian Church of God, but the founder of that particular branch of RCCG was an old classmate of mine. And she usually invites me to the annual conference. And so as I was thinking about what to say to the women at this conference, mostly middle class, accomplished, successful women, I thought to myself, maybe I should talk to them about how we work with one another as women, regardless of our different contexts and situations. What is the one thing that we as women can do for one another? And then I thought about something that happened in Uganda many years ago when I was part of running the African Women's Leadership Institute. We started running the Leadership Institute in 1996, and we would have these annual convenings in Uganda, in Entebbe, to be specific, where we would bring young women between the ages of 25 to 40 together from across the continent to talk about leadership development. And during one of those institutes, there was something that happened in one of the markets in Uganda. A woman went into labor suddenly. And the women in the market, there was no time to take her to the hospital. So the women in the marketplace rallied around her. Those who knew what to do started to help her deliver the baby, calling for hot water, blankets, towels, and so on. And the other women around brought out their wrappers, and they surrounded the woman to shield her from prying eyes. And we spoke about that at the Institute because everyone was amazed about this simple act of solidarity and support. So for me, those wrappers symbolize many things. They symbolize solidarity, a duty of care to other sisters, protection, compassion, empathy, and support. And you can call it feminist emotional intelligence. But if there's something that we as women need to be able to do to ensure that other people take us seriously, and that our quest for voice, for agency, for space gets listened to, we need to understand what it means to stand shoulder to shoulder with other sisters. And I was amazed at the way that particular essay, Where is Your Wrapper? Because after my remarks, I wrote it up as my weekly Loud Whispers essay. And I just simply sent it out the way I send out all my weekly essays. And I was amazed at how warmly it was received, not just within Nigeria, around the world. And I keep getting messages up to today about how women are using that essay to talk to themselves in their groups, to provide training, to have all kinds of conversations. And that's why I called that second volume, Where is Your Wrapper? Because it's something that a lot of people found, that they could identify with. And so for me, it's something that is a consistent reminder of how we as women might believe we don't have much. But there's something very powerful in that symbolism of standing and besides another sister. A wrapper can be anything. It can be a prayer. It can be a gift. It can be paying the school fees of the children of another sister. It could be paying her rent. It could be getting her a job or providing her with an opportunity, or just simply listening. But we can always do something to bring out a wrapper for another sister. And the way it works is the more wrappers you bring out for others, the more wrappers will come out for you on the day that you need them.
Exactly. Oh, I love this. I truly love this. Huh? And what I also love about this, it completely turns on its head the myth that women are our own worst enemies. Because what we're doing very often is bringing out wrappers, as you said, for each other. But I know there is a question that is often asked. I saw it was asked in the book, and one of I can't remember whether it was in Demand and Supply or Where is Your Wrapper? But I've heard it. I've been part of a women's leadership training where this thing keeps coming up. And I'm sure for many of our audience, it might also be in their minds, in terms of how far do you go to bring out your wrapper, to stand in solidarity, provide that duty of care and empathy to women who have, as you said, maybe in political office, broken trust, who have behaved unethically, who have done all kinds of things that are morally what we may call repugnant, how do we navigate that? How do we deal with that in terms of when women have crossed lines? How do we stand? What do we do with our rappers in that instance?
For me, it is a matter of principle, and it is a political commitment. Will there be women who will, pay you back in ways that you did not expect? Yes. Will there be women who take it upon themselves to ridicule you, to humiliate you, and to basically let you down and disappoint you in spite of all the ways in which you try to provide them with a wrapper? Absolutely. But then men have done nasty things and they continue to do nasty things. Men wage wars, men cause division, men continue to be really poor leaders. I don't see anyone calling men, their own worst enemy.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. No, in that respect, totally. But it's in the case of, for instance, we know of, I know you know who I'm talking about, but we know of a particular woman politician who has occupied a particular role, very senior, and the level of corruption it's just been embarrassing. So with her, what do we do as feminists? When people are actually calling her to account, do we bring out our rappers and defend her? Do we say, no, it doesn't matter whether she's a woman, she deserves to? So tell us more about how you extend that principle to when a woman has betrayed the trust that has been given to her as a leader.
Thank you, Taaka. This is a question I get all the time. And
yes.
For me, if you are sticking with the analogy of the wrapper,
yes,
if you're talking about wax print, the maximum length of wax print is 6 years.
Okay.
If it's lace material, the maximum length of Swiss lace is 5 years.
Okay.
Means that whatever wrapper you are talking about, and if it's our local kangas, the maximum length or width is usually 2 to 3 years.
Yes, yes.
Wrappers are not inexhaustible. There is always a limit. And so when we bring up these wrappers, we are not saying we are going to use these wrappers to cover corrupt, incompetent, women who let us down and give us a bad name and make it difficult for other women to climb up the ladder. Because what they do is when they climb up those ladders and behave in that way, they've kicked the ladder down. And so other women can't come up, because even though 5 other men have done exactly the same thing or worse, they will always refer to that one woman who performed badly. So there will always be those people who will let us down. And so for me, where it is a matter of political principle comes in is it does not stop us from supporting other women. Because one of the things you need to learn when you're a part of a social change movement or any kind of movement is when to cut your losses. And we've had to learn over the years to cut our losses when it comes to certain people, because there are certain people who act in ways which are beyond redemption. But what we are committed to do, and where the principle comes in, is it does not stop us from insisting on the principle of including women's voices in leadership. Yes. It doesn't stop us from insisting that women's voices, their bodies and their personhood need to be treated with respect.
Yeah. Yes.
And the more women who behave badly, the more examples we have to point out to the others who are coming behind us, the younger women, that this is how not to behave. This is how to be a respected feminist leader or a woman in public life. And so I hope that we'll continue to think about it in those terms and not allow people to use feminist political beliefs against us. I have encountered so many women who have behaved in the ways you are talking about. There are women who I have played a key role in supporting into certain spaces and have been appalled at the results. But has it stopped me from placing my faith in other women and what they can do with their own opportunities? No, it's a continuous process.
I love that. I love that. And I will continue to use this concept of where is your wrapper to encourage women to stand in solidarity with each other. Thank you. All right. I'm going to again pivot a little bit. You see, again, with you, there's so many things and so many areas we can explore. But it's a topic that came up in one of the books, and it was in Where Is Your Rapper, actually, huh? It's where I loved this essay. You talked about checking privilege. Oh, you see, I read it and I was like, ooh, this one, you know how you read things and you're like, oh, this one is speaking to me. This one is making me uncomfortable. Let me sit up. So I may need to check my privilege. But for our audience who may not have been able to read the book, it's recognizing that many people in leadership roles are highly privileged. And, we're privileged because of all the things that got us into positions of power. It could be our exposure, our experience, our education, our race, our class, those whole host of things. And yet how we manage that privilege becomes so important in terms of the impact of our leadership. So maybe tell our listeners more about, what do you mean when you say checking out, you need to check your privilege? And what does that mean for leadership on this continent?
When I say we should check our privilege, I think what I'm saying there is we need to acknowledge that we find ourselves in certain positions because we had opportunities. And those opportunities could be a range of things, mostly our background, our education, our networks, and the support systems that we have around us. So many things get us there. And so when we are in those positions, we shouldn't forget that there are others who do not have those opportunities. And so it is not about us feeling guilty for being the ones who survived a whole lot of things to be able to occupy a space. It's not about that. We don't have to apologize for who and what we are. The thing about privilege is you need to be able to acknowledge it for what it is and privileged to be here, and then do something worthwhile and transformatory with that privilege that you have. When we find ourselves in certain positions and we are unable to have a fair amount of humility, compassion, empathy, and understanding of the circumstances and context of others, then we need to check that privilege. And many of us are guilty of this, male and female alike, feminists and non-feminists alike. How many times have you heard women in leadership positions say, oh, well, I got to where I am because I'm competent, because I'm good? Yes, we know you're competent and we know you're good. How many times have we spoken to men, even those who claim to be champions for women's rights, or what the UN calls he for she, who tell you about the number of women who they employ and about the fact that no one in the institution suffers from discrimination? That is a lack of acknowledgement of privilege. And there are many of us, particularly women, who have to draw on so many networks of support to be able to keep going. Those who help look after our children when we are not around. Those who help cook for us and keep our homes clean when we are unable to. And then we don't recognize, or those who drive our children around when we are not there to drop them off at school and so on. Do we take care to find out how many children they have, or what responsibilities they have, or the difficulties that they face? And then we keep saying, but I pay them a salary, shouldn't that be enough? But maybe it's not always enough. So we need to be mindful of the privileges that we do have and use that as a means of broadening our understanding of the context in which we find ourselves and doing better as leaders. We need to be able to listen more, as Dr. Femi Awori used to say, to listen faithfully. And to be able to use that as a valuable tool on our leadership journey.
Love that. I really love that. And you talk about it very concretely. It means about being humble, compassionate, empathetic, listening faithfully, and particularly in our context where so many of us the level of inequality around us, we paying attention to that inequality and really starting to engage with those who are supporting us and enabling us to do so much of what we do, and really being a lot more involved to see how they are, not just I pay a salary in a transactional way, but really with empathy, seeing what's happening in their lives and how one can support. So loving it, checking your privilege. You know, I could talk to you forever. So let me just go to the last question.
Let me give you a quick anecdote about the privilege question. I found out a while ago that the television in my bedroom is linked, the satellite, the DSTV is linked to the television downstairs that the staff in the house usually gather around to watch African Magic. And so anytime I'm watching something on the TV in my bedroom, that's what they are forced to watch, because that's how the channel is configured. And I didn't realize this until one of them pointed it out to me, because apparently they were in the middle of this really exciting film and I switched the channels in my room. I felt so terrible about that. And when I found out, for a period of time, I made sure that I did not switch the channel, the DSTV channels. I would watch a DVD. And then eventually, I ended up getting a separate DSTV subscription for the room downstairs. So I understood that I was privileged to have more than one TV in my home, but I also understood how important it was to allow those who work in the house to have that, that comfort of being able to, watch something without being afraid that Madame was going to switch channels upstairs.
Oh, I love that. I like that. Thank you for sharing that. Hey. So my last question, again, something that you had in demand and supply, and maybe it's coming back to our grounding, what we share, that feminist space. And you talk about two concepts, voice and space, that have been important to you as an African feminist. Again, I bring it back to leadership broadly in this continent. How can we use those two concepts, voice and space, to fundamentally shift the nature of leadership on this continent?
Thank you, Taaka. I think those two concepts are extremely important, and they are inextricably linked. On the issue of voice, as leaders, we need to ask ourselves, whose voices are we listening to? Whose voices are represented round the table? And whose interests, because those voices will determine the interests that we prioritize. Are we only listening to people who sound like us and look like us? What are the voices of women, of young people, of older people, of disabled people, of gender diverse people, of people who have other kinds of identities around those tables? And leading on from that, what kind of spaces are we making available to them in terms of whether they want to organize themselves in formal employment, informal employment opportunities, into civil society organizations, into think tanks, into policy spaces? How are we ensuring that there's the opportunities for different kinds of voices and different kinds of spaces for us to be able to express ourselves and strengthen our different democratic spaces? And leaders need to be aware of how important this is. Otherwise, we'll continue to serve interests that will turn out to be marginal, excluding those who are actually supposed to be in the majority. And then when it comes back to bite us, we act surprised. Policies, our laws, our resources are meant to include the needs of everyone. And for us to be able to ensure that that happens, their voices and the spaces that they occupy need to be acknowledged.
I love that. So the voices, it's asking yourself that fundamental question: whose voices are we listening to? And ensuring that often those voices that are not traditionally heard, those that have been typically being excluded, are given space to be heard. But also, like, then you tied it to the idea of spaces, huh? And what types of spaces are we creating for people to express themselves, be their full self? And I know you speak of it almost at a leadership level nationally, or within a state, but I'm imagining one could also apply that to organizational leadership as well, huh?
Oh yes, absolutely, because whatever drives our mission as organizations, we need to be able to ask ourselves who is captured in this mission that we have and the vision of the communities we are trying to see. And if you think that there's some people, or if it's brought to your attention that there are some people who are not being captured, you have a duty to ensure that that wrapper is extended to as many as possible.
And so then you also have to bring out your rappers, because here we're extending it to all. It's become exactly a leadership tool that we use. I love it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Without the limitations that metaphor has, as I said, that as feminists, but particularly we are talking about the feminist movement, we have a political commitment to ensure that as feminists, we do whatever we can to interrogate patriarchy in all the ways in which it manifests itself in our economic systems, our political systems, religious systems, social systems, technological, and so on. And ensure that the voices that populate those systems and the spaces that they are attempting to build for themselves are addressed in ways that bring about transformative change.
And what a perfect way to almost end, because I have 10 follow-up questions on that, because now it was getting juicy, but I have to discipline myself. Oh, Her Excellency Erelu Bisi Adeleye-Fayemi, you have been absolutely amazing, my sister. Thank you so much for making time, sharing those pearls of wisdom. Please keep writing, keep sharing your gift, and continue with your amazing feminist leadership. Thank you so much for joining us. Huh?
And thank you so much, Sister Taaka. You are an example of an inspiring leader who continues to lead by example. You continue to show the way. You continue to lead with such grace, humility, and empathy. And there are so many things that other women leaders, particularly young women, can continue to learn from you. So thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for this space. And you too continue to do this great work.
Amen. Thank you. Audience, thank you for joining us. Don't miss the next episode. We'll see you soon. Hello, wonderful leader. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the podcast. I learned a lot, and I hope you did too. If you want more of the lessons, experiences, and nuggets for effective leadership, join our amazing platform for leaders, the African Leaders Circle. Learn more at www.busara-africa.com. And if you like the show, don't forget to subscribe and share with other amazing leaders. See you soon. Ciao.